Thank you for the introduction, and also thank you for having me here. It was a really great experience to listen to all of your presentations. The aim of my presentation is to introduce the International Steel Sculptor Workshop in Dunaújváros, which is a really small city, almost exactly in the middle of Hungary. And in order to represent or introduce this workshop, first I really need to tell a little bit about this city, but very quickly. So this city was the first socialist city in Hungary after the Second World War. The Hungarian Working People's Party decided to establish a new city and a new metallurgical factory. And at first they wanted to build the factory in Mohács, which is, as you can see, really close to the southern border. Back then it was the Yugoslavia border, but after a few months of planning, they decided to relocate the whole project because of geopolitical situation became very bad. So they put this whole idea in the middle of Hungary. It was a small village called Dunaújváros, and they started to build a new city. And at first, from 51 to 61, it was called City of Stalin, a little bit similar than Stalingrad. And I have a few pictures from the beginning of the city. This whole city, the idea of the city, it was an experiment. The purpose was to build the perfect city for the perfect socialist man. And in order to do this, they hired an architect who was a really trained professional. He was a student of the Bauhaus, and then he went to Paris and Chile, and he had projects in different places of the world. And during the Second World War, he had to move to Chile. And when he heard about this exceptional opportunity to build a new town, he came home. And this whole idea to establish this new city was based on the community and the neighborhood units, actually. This was the first neighborhood unit, and they started to build the whole city in 1950. But of course, the main project was the metallurgical factory. So at the beginning, the constructions of the city and the factory happened in the same time. So it was a little bit chaotic, but in a few years, it became a whole. And at first it was very strictly regulated who can settle in the city, and the party had really harsh control over everything. The purpose of these neighborhood units were basically that people can focus on to be a real socialist man. So they had everything really close to their home: the shops, the kindergartens, the play schools, the grocery stores, and everything. So they didn't have to go far away and spend much time for shopping or everything else. They had to focus on their work and then have a little bit free time. And of course, at first, they didn't have library or a culture house or schools for adults. They only had the public spaces, the streets and the parks in the city, and it was really popular among the inhabitants to just gather around on the streets, actually. You can see a few pictures. They had a lot of parks in the city, and they had these games and also chess tables on the streets. And now a few words about the art of the city, because it was also controlled very, very much by the party, Socialist Party. They decided to establish a new method, and they, with the foundation of the factory, they hired artists. It was an open call, and if someone applied, they had the opportunity to move the city. You can see the those really big windows at the top of the houses. These were the studios, what they got. They got a monthly stipend, studio, apartment, and in exchange they had to produce artworks, preferably such artworks which fitted in the national canon, I mean the socialist art. This is another picture of the studios, and this is how it looks like now. Chess tables, as I mentioned, were on the streets, and the city was filled with socialist art, of course. You can see the mosaics here. It was one of the first buildings which were constructed. It's a storehouse, and you can see the these scenes, these mosaics which were made for the people actually, and it's a little bit telling a story of the town, like how the architect shows the plan for the village people, how they start the construction. It's a scene from it's iron casting, a scene from the factory, another scene from the construction, and how they spend their free time. It's the uniform of the Hungarian folk dance. And another really iconic art from the town is the fresco. This is the main entrance of the metallurgical factory, and which is really odd about this fresco, that you can barely see what's on it actually because of the columns. So this is really nice, people like it, but for the naked eye it's really hard to take a look at. But this is how it looks like, and it was more or less made in the same time than the mosaics. So it's really similar, the story, what it shows. And some other sculptures from the town. Of course, it's not so abstract or something like that. This socialist style was the nationally expected style. Another one, it's in front of the library, and this man is a metallurgist, and this is the symbol of the town still, actually. And two more from the post office. So this town was a really well structured and really coordinated unit. Actually, it was really popular after 10, 15 years amongst the people to move there. So by the 60s or 70s, the life was much better here. People were richer and the culture was very vivid, so people really wanted to go there. And the main problem, actually, this whole idea was really well structured. They only left one thing from the plan, that the whole city was built on loess, which is a loose sediment, which tends to slump under moisture and weight, and it needs something to hold it together. So they didn't really consider it, actually, but the afforestation was really important in the city. As you can see, the streets, there are young trees there. Now it's like a park everywhere in the city, which is really surprising, according to a metallurgical city. This is how it looks like now. But you can see how it looked before, especially at the left part of the photos. This it was really not a nice place to build a town on, actually, because this loose sediment is not so good for a town. You can see that there is a construction, some building is under construction, and this side of this bank of the Danube is not so well structured. And a few years later, actually in 1964 and 65, there was a collapse of this wall, and it was a really huge disaster for the town. You can see how it looked on the left side of the picture, and it happened 2 times after, actually, within half a year. So they needed a plan to make a structure for this riverside, and they started to build a park or an arboretum. And you can see a few pictures about it, how they made it. Actually, it is still a really great foundation. The city needs it very much. And I will show. It's close to the how it looks now, and I will show you a video how it really looks.
Európában egyedülálló módon már a 60-as években megépítettek egy komplex védelmi rendszert, itt, Dunaújváros mellett fekvő Dunai partszakaszon. A városban és a környéken az évtizedek alatt elvégzett partfal erősítés eredménye, hogy az utóbbi időben már csak kisebb földmozgások történtek. A Dunaparton sétálgatva nem csak a gyönyörű panorámát, valamint az immár arborétumok növénytársulásainak sokféleségét idéző parkot csodálhatjuk meg, hanem azt a mintegy 60 szobrot is, amelyek az 1974 óta kisebb-nagyobb rendszerességgel szervezett nemzetközi acélszobrász alkotótelep és szimpózium zsűrizet alkotásai. A parton az egyedi mászóház egyben madárlesként is működik, valamint a füves sportpálya és a kellemes piknikezőhelyek is népszerű
This video was made by the local government just half a year ago, and the narration is really not important because it's propaganda. It's actually very surprising how similar it is to the socialist propaganda. It's awful, but you can have a look at the bank of the Danube, and this is the metallurgical factory, which is still has a really great part of the life of the town, of course. So now you can see how it looked like before and after the collapse of the wall. And now I can start to introduce the steel sculpture workshop, which was actually organized by local initiatives from 1974. Those 3 men who started to organize these workshops, one of them was an artist and 2 of them were engineers from the factory, but also artists, but not professional artists. And they had this idea to establish a workshop with the help of the factory, with the materials of the factory, and it was actually supported, surprisingly, by the local government and also the factory. You can see a few pictures from those times. It was an open call, and there was a jury who coordinated the applications, and the sculptors came for 4 to 6 weeks. They get accommodation, meals, daily stipend, and they get a whole group within the factory to work with. And of course, workers were really enthusiastic because it was so different what they used to do on a daily basis. And also a few photos from the factory. He was the main founder of this whole workshop. And I will show soon, really soon, the actual sculptures. You can see some drawings and, oops. And this is how now it looks like. So it was what was really surprising that I showed you how the artworks from the town looked like. They were really filled with the propaganda, and these are, in contrast, are more very, very much abstract sculptures. And actually, it was really unique with this workshop that such artists could participate who were neglected or prohibited by the national canon. They couldn't participate in any national open calls or applications or cultural events, but for this workshop they could apply, and many of them get in more than one time actually. It was a biennale system, and from 74 until 89, and then 3 more workshops were held. The last one was in 2000. After 83, it became an international event, and those artists who came from foreign countries, they went to excursions to Budapest and all those very popular places of Hungary. And after they were working in the factory. They produced their large sculptures and also smaller plastics. They always had a closing exhibition to show to the people what they did. Of course, it was a really huge event in the town, not only the workshop, but the exhibition. And but the main events were always when they erected the actual sculptures on the bank of the Danube, because after the fall of the wall and after they built this really great structure, it became really popular amongst the inhabitants to use the bank of the Danube. Before that, it was more or less just a place for the kids to play. My parents have crazy stories how they played there and what they did there. It was more like a vagabond place or a jungle for kids or something like that. So you can see a few pictures about how they erected these sculptures, and they are really different, not just from each other, but as I said, from those artworks where people used to in the town. So it's not so surprising that at the beginning it was a really big misunderstanding from the inhabitants and from the local government. And actually the original plan was to erect these sculptures within the city to new neighborhood units. But the local government prohibited it, so they went to a storage. And when a French communist came to the town to visit, he was aware of this workshop, and the local government told the organizers that okay, now we should show something, and they quickly put the sculptures to the bank of the Danube, and it became a habit actually after that. It was shortly after the collapse. It was more or less in the same time the replacement of the sculptures and the building of the riverside. This is how it looks now. And for a short time after the workshop, they put in the middle of the town for a few weeks the sculptures, and then replaced it and put it on the other places. I will show a few pictures about the actual sculptures. I have a few of these. You can see a map of how they are located. a little picture of every sculpture. I didn't put everything on the presentation, and of course the names of the sculptures and the artists. I only show you a few ones which has some nicknames amongst the inhabitants. This one is called the Toblerone, you know, the chocolate. This one is called the Romeo and Juliet. Actually, it's a really nice picture because my friend who made the picture for my thesis erased the graffitis, but now it's in a really, really bad shape. This one, called by the inhabitants the brown crab, it's really popular amongst the youngsters. When I was in high school, we had meetings there and parties on top of that. It wasn't so safe, but now it's still really popular. This one, called the compass. The original name is Alpha and Omega, but for us it looked like some kind of compasses. This one is called past and present. The original name is Windows to the Eternity. So inhabitants really establish new names and nicknames. They, after a time, they get to like them. Actually, this one is really special because this tree was the only tree which survived the collapse of the wall. So they managed to relocate it, and this chair is called the consultant. And there are many people who try to climb it and just sit on the chair. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any photos of it, but it was really popular. And this one is in this nickname subject my favorite because of the generation gap. You can see at first it was called the rooster, and then a generation after it was called the giraffe, and now it's called the dinosaur. So, you know, as globalization came, people get familiar with different animals, and now for the new generation it's the dinosaur. This one is just a foot, actually, but it's called the Entry to the Future. And you can see that almost every sculpture is vandalized somehow, which is actually a really great problem, because some of them are in really, really bad shape now. And okay, I will finish just in a second. But people, as I mentioned, managed to get familiar with them, use them, like them. They had stories about it. I'm not sure how it's visible, but you can push these things together and it has a strange noise, which is, everyone knows how, if they hear this noise, that they immediately know that, yeah, it comes from that sculpture. Yeah, there is this guy on the top of it. Actually, he likes to do yoga in really crazy places of the town, but it's a really good example of how to use these sculptures. Yeah, it's not from here. I can't go in this right now. But it's another great example, actually, for how to imply them in the life of the city. And just a few. This one was stolen, actually, the whole sculpture. It's 2 or 3 meters high and at least 2 or 3 tons. So I really have no idea how they managed it. They needed some equipment for this, but it's really sad that they stole it, probably because it's made from a really expensive material, of course. And last year we had an exhibition about the workshop, because it was the 40th anniversary of the establishment, and it was a huge success. We made city tours. Actually, it was really popular amongst the inhabitants, and now we are really try to re-establish this whole workshop. We are working on it for years now, and let's hope that next year we can do something. Of course, not in such a big scale, but something small. Thank you.